For decades, these cases haunted communities, families, and investigators, until now. Thanks to breakthroughs in DNA technology, forensic genealogy, and relentless detective work, 22 cold cases have finally found closure. If you're captivated by real-life mysteries and the pursuit of justice, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Let's delve into these remarkable stories. In November 2004, John Thieleson vanished from Ohio after making a troubling phone call to his sister. He was distressed, disoriented, and no one knew where he was going. Days later, nearly 2,000 miles away in Phoenix, Arizona, a man was found dead on a sidewalk. No ID. No name. Just another unsolved case in a sea of unknowns. For 20 years, the remains sat in a morgue, listed only as a John Doe. But in 2024, advancements in forensic genealogy changed everything. A DNA match linked the body to John's family. It wasn't foul play, but a tragic case of mental health deterioration and displacement. His loved ones finally got answers, and a chance to say goodbye. After 2 decades, the question of "where's John?" was finally answered. In the quiet suburb of Winter Haven, Florida, 30-year-old Julia Wilbanks was a loving mother, wife, and a well-respected member of the community. But in 1991, everything changed. Julia was found in her own home, stabbed 17 times, left to die in what police described as an act of sheer rage. Her family was devastated, and despite investigators chasing down dozens of leads, the trail went cold. For over 30 years, the case haunted detectives. Then, in 2024, investigators retrieved DNA from a straw discarded by a man named Gene Stuller, Julia's former neighbor. The DNA matched evidence recovered at the crime scene. It was the moment Julia's family had been waiting decades for. Stuller was arrested and charged with her murder. A cold case no more. On a chilly November evening in 1988, 29-year-old Deborah Trops left work early to make a hair appointment. She was separated from her husband at the time and had a custody exchange planned afterward. But she never made it home. Hours later, her abandoned car was found in a parking lot outside a dental office. Inside the trunk was Deborah, strangled with a telephone cord. For decades, suspicion hovered over her estranged husband, Robert Trops. He had inconsistencies in his story, but no physical evidence connected him to the murder. That is, until 2023. A renewed investigation used advanced DNA techniques to retest the cord, and finally, there it was, his DNA. In 2025, Robert was convicted of her murder, ending a 36-year nightmare for Deborah's family. It was a warm June morning in 1972 when a truck driver made a grim discovery on a roadside ditch near Lebanon, Indiana. A woman's lifeless body lay beside the road, her young daughter sitting unharmed nearby, too young to understand what had happened. That woman was 26-year-old Phyllis Baylor. She had been brutally raped and strangled. For 50 years, her killer's identity remained a mystery, until 2024. Using forensic genealogy, investigators traced DNA from Phyllis's clothing to Fred Allen Lieneman, a man with a long history of violence who died in the 1980s. Though he won't face justice in a courtroom, the truth has finally surfaced. And for the daughter who survived, now in her 50s, the haunting question of who killed her mother has been answered. For nearly 5 decades, she was known only as the Lady of the Dunes. In 1974, her mutilated body was discovered in the sand dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts. Her hands were missing. Her head was crushed. Her face was nearly unrecognizable. The brutality of the crime, combined with her unknown identity, turned her into one of the country's most haunting Jane Doe cases. Then came a breakthrough in 2022. Forensic genealogy revealed her name, Ruth Marie Terry, a 37-year-old from Tennessee. But that wasn't the end. In 2023, investigators linked her murder to her husband, Guy Rockwell Moldovan, a man with a violent past and a trail of mysterious disappearances behind him. Ruth's identity was restored, and the truth finally came out. Her story now has a name and a resolution. In 1981, 30-year-old Sonia Herrick-Stone was found dead in her Carmel, California apartment. The crime was brutal. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. At the time, police had a suspect, Michael Scott Glazebrook. He had a history with Sonia and had given conflicting accounts. But with no solid DNA match, the case stalled. Then, in 2023, thanks to refined DNA technology, evidence recovered from Sonia's fingernails finally confirmed what many had long suspected. It was Glazebrook. Over 4 decades after the crime, he was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. The case, once ice cold, now stands as a triumph of persistence and science. In July of 1971, Rita Curran, a 24-year-old schoolteacher, was found strangled to death in her Burlington, Vermont apartment. The attack was sudden and violent, and there were no signs of forced entry. For over 50 years, the case remained one of Vermont's most notorious unsolved murders. In 2023, a cigarette butt left at the scene, previously thought irrelevant, was retested using modern DNA analysis. The match? William DeRoos, a neighbor living in the same building at the time. He had a history of violence and had died in 1986. No one ever suspected him. His wife had lied to give him an alibi. But now, with the truth uncovered, Rita's family finally received closure. On a spring morning in 1983, the body of 18-year-old Tammy Bristow was found in a wooded area near Jacksonville, Florida. She had been raped and strangled. Her murder shocked the local community and devastated her family. Investigators worked the case for years, but with little evidence and no strong suspects, it eventually went cold. For decades later, in 2023, investigators revisited evidence using modern forensic technology. They recovered male DNA from Tammy's clothing and ran it through genealogy databases. It led to one name, 59-year-old Ronnie Hyde, a former youth pastor with a disturbing past. He was arrested and charged, finally bringing the case into the light after 40 long years. In the summer of 1976, 68-year-old Lela Johnston was found dead inside her Oklahoma City home. She had been viciously beaten and strangled. There was no sign of forced entry, and nothing of value was taken, suggesting this wasn't a random break-in. For years, detectives believed the killer might have been someone she knew. But despite dozens of interviews and leads, the trail ran cold. Her case sat dormant for nearly 5 decades. Then in December 2024, a cold case unit revisited the evidence. New testing of DNA found on items. In March 1975, 16-year-old Sharon Pryor left her Montreal home to meet friends at a nearby pizzeria. She never arrived. For days later, her body was discovered in a vacant lot in Longueuil, Quebec. She had been raped, beaten, and suffocated. The brutal nature of the crime shocked the community, and despite extensive investigations, the case went cold. Wikipedia. For nearly 5 decades, Sharon's family sought answers. In 2023, advancements in DNA technology and genetic genealogy provided a breakthrough. Investigators linked DNA evidence from the crime scene to the Romine family in West Virginia. Further investigation revealed that Franklin Maywood Romine had lived in Montreal at the time of the murder. His body was exhumed, and DNA testing confirmed him as Sharon's killer. Romine had died in 1982, but the revelation brought long-awaited closure to a case that had haunted a family and a community for 48 years. On the morning of November 6, 1999, Jennifer Watkins went missing after arriving for her shift at Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. Her body was found 2 days later in a remote stairwell, hidden behind a mechanical room door. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered, right inside the hospital. The case baffled investigators for 20 years. But in 2020, advanced DNA techniques linked her death to a man named Michael White, who had no connection to her and no reason to be in that area. He was living freely until a genealogy search closed in. He was arrested and sentenced to life. Justice finally came for Jennifer, 2 decades later. Gwen Miller was just 16 when she disappeared from her home in Shreveport in 1976. Her body was discovered weeks later in a shallow grave. She had been strangled and left like she didn't matter. For years, her case gathered dust, until 2023. Investigators re-examined the case using DNA left on Gwen's clothing and matched it to a man named Harold Smith, who had lived nearby at the time of her murder. He died in 2010, but the evidence was conclusive. For Gwen's surviving relatives, it was bittersweet. Her killer was gone, but they finally knew his name. Amy Meljevic was just 10 years old when she was abducted from a shopping plaza in Bay Village, Ohio. Her case gripped the nation. Months later, her body was discovered in a field 50 miles away. Despite countless leads, suspects, and tips over the years, no one was ever arrested. But in early 2024, a massive forensic review identified new fibers and male DNA not previously tested. That evidence pointed to a former middle school teacher who had been interviewed early in the case, but never charged. Though he died in 2019, prosecutors announced he was now considered the killer. Amy's case, long thought unsolvable, had found its ending. 8-year-old Shannon Polk was playing outside her home in Prattville, Alabama, when she vanished. For 6 agonizing weeks, her family searched and hoped. Then her body was found in a wooded area near a landfill. She had been brutally assaulted and murdered. In 2023, DNA evidence recovered from Shannon's clothing was re-examined using genealogical databases. It led to a man named Ricky Brown Jr., who had lived just blocks away at the time. He was arrested and charged more than 20 years after the murder. For Shannon's mother, who never stopped fighting, justice finally arrived. In July 1981, 20-year-old Patricia Parker was found strangled in her Philadelphia apartment. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting she may have known her killer. The case frustrated investigators for years, dozens interviewed, evidence collected, but no suspect. Fast forward to 2024, a small fragment of DNA left on Patricia's bedsheet was reprocessed using new technology. It matched James Greer, a man who had lived in the building at the time. He had since relocated out of state, living a quiet life under the radar. Now in his 70s, Greer was arrested and charged. Patricia's case had finally come full circle after 43 years. Mary Jane Thompson was 21 when she was found murdered near an abandoned railway in Dallas in 1980. She had been raped and strangled, and her body left in the open. Investigators worked tirelessly, even exhuming her body in 2009 for further testing, but it wasn't until 2023 that they got their break. DNA extracted from her clothing led to Edward Morgan, a 61-year-old Dallas resident with a history of violence. His sample had never been in the system until a recent arrest placed him there. After 43 years, Morgan was charged, and Mary Jane's family finally got the news they'd waited a lifetime to hear. In May 1996, 17-year-old Jessica Baggen vanished after leaving a friend's birthday party in Sitka, Alaska. 2 days later, her body was found in a wooded area. She had been raped and strangled. The town was shaken, and the pressure to solve the case was immense. After decades of dead ends, forensic genealogy made the breakthrough in 2020. A suspect was identified, Stephen Downs, who had been living in Maine. When authorities arrived to question him, he took his own life. While the ending came without a trial, the evidence was conclusive. Jessica's case finally had a name, and her family got closure. Carla Walker was a 17-year-old high school student in Fort Worth when she was kidnapped from a bowling alley parking lot in 1974. Her body was found days later in a drainage ditch. She had been tortured and murdered. For decades, the case haunted the community and her family. In 2020, a Gatorade bottle found at the scene was retested using advanced DNA analysis. It led to Glenn Samuel McCurley, a local man who had once been questioned but dismissed. After being confronted with the evidence, he confessed. He was sentenced to life in prison. After nearly 50 years, Carla's voice was finally heard. Belinda Temple, a beloved teacher and mother, was found shot to death in her bedroom closet in 1999. Her husband, David Temple, claimed it was a burglary gone wrong, but investigators weren't convinced. The evidence suggested the scene had been staged. In 2019, after 2 trials and decades of legal twists, David Temple was finally convicted of her murder. But in 2023, a state appeals court reaffirmed the verdict. Justice had taken years, but it finally stuck. Belinda's family, who never gave up, saw the system bring her killer to justice at last. Amber Creek was just 14 when she ran away from a group home in Illinois. Days later, her body was found in a Wisconsin marsh, bound with duct tape and strangled. Her case went cold quickly, but her memory lived on in the hearts of many. In 2014, DNA evidence pointed to James Eaton, a man with a troubling past. But it wasn't until 2017 that charges were officially filed. His trial was delayed for years, but in 2023, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. For Amber's family, the long wait for justice had finally ended. Linda O'Keefe was just 11 years old when she disappeared walking home from school in Newport Beach. Her body was discovered the next morning in a ditch, strangled. The case was cold for decades, but police never gave up. In 2018, Newport Beach police used social media to share Linda's story using imagined tweets in her voice. That attention led to fresh leads. In 2019, DNA genealogy linked the murder to James Neal, living under an alias. In 2023, he was convicted. Linda's voice, once silenced, had helped solve her own case. In 1980, an unidentified woman was found murdered in Blue Earth, Minnesota. She was beaten, sexually assaulted, and left in a ditch. For 35 years, she was known only as a Jane Doe, until 2015, when DNA confirmed her identity, Michelle Busha, an 18-year-old from Texas who had hitchhiked to Minnesota. Then came the confession. A former Texas state trooper, Robert Leroy Nelson, admitted to killing her. He was already serving time for another crime. In 2023, the case officially closed. After decades of anonymity and silence, Michelle was finally named, and her killer held accountable. These 22 stories remind us that time doesn't erase the truth, it only delays it. Through science, persistence, and the voices of those who never stopped fighting, justice has finally spoken. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, we read every one. And if you want more true crime stories just like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a chilling update. This is True Crimes Now. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.